Hello, and welcome to another edition of Virtual Project Table Talk. I'm Maria Turner, the Executive Director of the Fond du Lac Area Women's Fund, and I'm coming at you today with two guests who will be sharing with us details surrounding October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I have Nicole Johnson of Solution Center and Amy Bayer of SSM Health Domestic Violence Services. So, we are going to talk a little bit today about the activities that are happening in October throughout Fond du Lac County surrounding Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I wanted to just give all of you viewers just a little bit of background about October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Believe it or not, it's been around since 1981, October of 1981. It started with a day of unity, a single day provided by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And that was an opportunity to bring advocates together in a space where they could talk about domestic violence openly, honor victims and survivors, and just get awareness out surrounding this topic that so often had been kept in the shadows. So fast forward over the years, the day evolved into a week, and then it evolved into an entire month in October of 1987. That was the first month-long celebration, which coincided with the National Domestic Violence Hotline being introduced to our country. In 1989, Congress made the month official with the passage of Public Law 101-112. There'll be a test on that later, so make sure you remember that. And the Day of Unity actually still continues. It's recognized as the first Monday in October. So here in Fond du Lac County, events have been taking place for dozens of years, most recently being designated as Light Up the Night. And today we'll talk about this year's Light Up the Night event plans, and also broadly about domestic violence and its prevalence here in Fond du Lac County. And this is all part of our Fond du Lac Says No More initiative, of which both Nicole and Amy have been a critical part. So let's get started. Nicole, if you could tell us a little bit about some of the work that you are doing at Solutions Center. Can you describe for our listeners the programming available to victims of domestic violence when they come to your doors at Solutions Center?
Yeah, of course. Hi, and thanks for having me here. So I would say that our services really focus on two pieces that we're probably most widely known for, which is our emergency shelter and crisis intervention services. So as far as crisis intervention, we provide 24/7 hotlines. So you can call us day or night. If you cannot sleep at 3 a.m., call us. We have an advocate who is available to talk with you through whatever you have going on in your life. That does include emergency shelter as well, which is a 24/7 operation. We are fully staffed at that facility at all times. But we also provide financial emergency assistance. So this can help people really kind of just get through a moment in their life when just that one thing can bridge for them between stability and safety and maybe not being safe. We also do general safety planning with everyone who comes through our doors or calls us on the phone. We also do advocacy, which includes legal advocacy. We do housing and employment advocacy. We offer case management services. We do mobile advocacy, which means that we can actually come to the survivors. So if they are somewhere in Fond du Lac County, because our building is in downtown Fond du Lac, but if you live out in Ripon or Campbellsport or wherever, we will come to you and meet you at a public place. So if transportation is a barrier and a survivor feels like that's something that would prohibit her or him from getting services, it's not. We also provide child and teen advocacy, so specifically working with the youth in our community. We offer peer advocacy, which is like support groups and women offering support to other women, or teens offering support to other teens in our community. And then, of course, prevention education is a huge piece of what we do to really get the message out there. And how can we truly try to work to end domestic violence, abuse, child abuse in our community?
Yeah, Nicole, thank you for that overview. I think a lot of times when people about a domestic violence shelter or think about that, they're not aware of all the different programming that's available to victims and survivors as well as their children. And the idea that you do not necessarily have to stay in the shelter to access a lot of those services, which I know that a lot of people they just don't need the support of being in the shelter itself, but they could certainly utilize things like legal advocacy or just coming to talk to someone or having their kids talk to someone about what they've been through. And so I love hearing about all of that programming. The Women's Fund has been a critical partner in some of that work over the years. I know we have a grant with you right now that we're really happy to be partnering with, and in providing some of those financial resources to women and their children. So Amy, let's talk about Agnesian SSM Health, also providing specialized domestic violence services. Can you walk us through what is offered to victims and survivors through your programming?
Yeah, absolutely. Specifically for victims, we work with individuals who have been affected by violence, either witnessed violence, so that means children as well. So we provide counseling services ages 4 all the way through adulthood. A lot of our services are really similar to Solution Center. We provide that legal advocacy, the prevention education. We actually collaborate in schools, which I think is pretty awesome that we have that relationship with each other, because our program is limited. We are not a 24/7 service like Solution Center is. So think of like those stereotypical bank hours. So if it is after hours, we do refer individuals over to Solution Center, because when it's 3 o'clock in the morning, not really looking for services, looking for a place to sleep. So it just makes a lot more sense having that ongoing relationship. So in addition to the legal advocacy, crisis intervention, assisting with housing resources, different things like that, we do have consultation services. So similar to like when Cole was saying with the advocacy, we can meet individuals if it's not safe necessarily for them to come to our building. We work within the greater Fond du Lac area. In addition to that, we are viewed as a community benefit program. So even though we're with the hospital, we don't charge for our services for our victims. So we don't ask for insurance or co-pays, anything like that, which is great to have because of the different number of services we are able to offer, that they don't have to worry about paying for a counselor or different things like that, which I think is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important to note. I did not know that. I thought being affiliated with the hospital, there might be some need to have insurance as part of that whole process. So thank you for making us aware that that is not the case, and it's open to individuals that need it regardless of their financial or their insurance status. I think that's a great benefit to the community, as you pointed out, Amy. So the two of you have both worked in this sphere for long enough to have heard, some of the myths and criticisms surrounding the issue of domestic violence. And often there's a lot of victim blaming that goes on related to this subject matter. Specifically surrounding, and this is a comment that I know that I heard a lot when I worked in the shelter too, was why doesn't she just leave, right? So Nicole, can you tackle that one in terms of what you see as reasons why women may choose not to leave abusive relationships immediately?
Yeah, so I am just going to touch on the surface here a little bit because it is such a complicated answer to such a complicated situation in the first place. And I think what's really important is to, first of all, really just kind of take into account that we are taking this person's whole lived experience with her, right? Like it's not just domestic violence that is affecting her life. Like she might be a mother, she might be searching for a job, she might have transportation barriers, depending on if she is living in the city or maybe living somewhere more rural in our community. Like there's so many layers to this survivor's life that just saying she's a victim of domestic violence and should leave is not going deep enough. But I would say that there are probably some themes that we see as to why a victim might choose to stay. And I'll just kind of touch on a couple of them. So first of all, I would say that children are usually a big barrier. One, maybe they're concerned about their safety. So if they choose to leave that relationship and then a custody might come into play and she's no longer there. And actually, let me pause. I just want to really quickly be conscious of my language, and then I'm going to use she, her pronouns just for the sake of this. But please know that we recognize that a victim has no boundaries or barriers and can most certainly be men as well. So, but she may feel like if she's not there taking the brunt of the abuse, that maybe when she's not there, her children will. She may fear having to do like custody exchanges at some point, and maybe feeling like that's a fearful moment. There could be a lot of other interactions in play there, maybe feeling guilt or some sort of shame associated with that as well. There could be the barrier of the financial or economic dependence. So maybe she doesn't have the financial resources. And that's one of the biggest pieces that we do see in abuse is financial abuse, where whether they have their own job or have their own money, they don't have access to that money. So are they going to become homeless? Do they have transportation to get to where they need to go? What is their options? Do they have family or friends in the area? Are they totally isolated? That might be a huge barrier for her. Sometimes it comes down to like property and pets, needing to leave behind everything that you have to flee in a moment. Sometimes that can be really significant, especially when it comes to the pets. And we do have a pet program. So if someone feels like that's a barrier, we can certainly work with that victim and figure out safety for their animals as well as for the humans that are living in that household. We see oftentimes too that fear is such a huge piece of that. And that really comes down to actually two different layers. They could be fear of not being believed. So that could actually come into play when it comes to coworkers, community, family and friends, feeling like they might not be believed when they actually do start to describe the abuse that they're feeling, or fear of really being harmed by this person. We have a program in our community we call it LAP. It's a lethality assessment program, and both Solution Center, the domestic violence services through SSM Health, and the police department partake in this, where we assess victims in the moment of their crisis at how high of a risk they are in danger of being killed by their partner. And that's a very real reality for a lot of survivors, that the moment that they leave is sometimes the most dangerous part. And when we look at the homicide statistics, a third of victims that have been killed by their perpetrators were in an attempt to actually leave that relationship. And lastly, I think it's really important to point out that, sometimes the survivor still loves this person. They remember all the good times that they shared. They have really good memories together. They want the relationship to work. They just want it to be more safe. They just want it to be better, and whatever that looks like for them. And so really respecting that and trying to work with them on safety planning, and making it as safe as we can, and still working with them in the context of wanting to be in that relationship is something that we can do as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Nicole. As you stated, it's complicated, right? So I think a lot of people just want to make this issue very black and white, and it's just not. Every situation is slightly different. I think the one thing that I learned is that the women themselves know what they need, right? And so advocates are great in being able to pull that out of each woman or each survivor they work with, and know what they feel is going to keep them safest in that moment. So I think that's the biggest piece, is doing what will make sure that they're at the lowest risk possible in some of these really difficult situations. So, Amy, let's shift gears a little bit here. I know that a great deal of the work that you've done personally has been working with male offenders. I think this is perhaps maybe surprising to some people to think that there would be community resources available to the abusers themselves. Can you talk a little bit about that piece for us? Perhaps addressing the idea, that many people have in their minds surrounding what a typical abuser looks like, right? We see these things on TV, and it's usually the most horrific of cases and monsters, right? And while those individuals do exist, I don't think that's the typical. So can you talk to that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to echo to what Nicole was saying, that we do see individuals, victims, as well as offenders who are both male and female. So the population I work with, I think, is the first kind of myth, so to speak, is that everyone assumes that the aggressor is male. But we do have programming here specifically for women and programming here specifically for male offenders that I am a part of. I think the thing to keep in mind as well is that those individuals who have been charged with a domestic related offense or have a background of being the aggressor, they also have a background of being either a victim or witness to violence or experience some kind of trauma as a child. I see that with probably 99% of the individuals walking through the door is they have identified experiencing some kind of trauma themselves, whether that be sexual abuse, whether that be physical abuse, whether or not they've had exposure to drugs or alcohol or, absent parents. There was some kind of trauma that they had experienced. So in addition to our offender program that we have here, we actually offer counseling services for individuals. And those counseling services is a service that we don't charge for. We do charge for our offender programming. And it's not because they're offenders, we have to make them pay for stuff. Accountability is a huge part that we do have, but it's also an education. So we're teaching individuals skills that maybe they didn't get when they were kids. We're talking basic coping strategies, communication, relationships. We've had both victims and offenders identify that they're not really sure what a healthy relationship is. So being able to have that dialogue, and our group really kind of learns from each other as well. So it's really kind of that peer mindset as well, which is what we really appreciate. And we see a lot of growth throughout the program. It's pretty lengthy. It's about 6 months. And we have a lot of different aspects to that program. And then afterwards, about 50% do ask for aftercare services, whether that be counseling, and we've explored different kind of options as well.
I love, Amy, that you talked about the idea that most offenders have experienced some sort of traumatic event themselves, right? It really ties into this idea or this phrase that you hear a lot of hurt people, right? And so that's not to make an excuse for the behaviors that they've perpetrated against other individuals. But like you said, a lot of that comes down to learning what is appropriate and not having a model to look to while growing up, or being in a home where there was just constant dysfunction really just changes your brain. It literally changes your brain. And so the way that those offenders are responding in situations is probably sometimes totally just outside their control in a lot of ways, because their brain kicks into a trauma response. So I love that you're working with the people that have that need the help in that vein too, because I don't think it's a single tiered approach, right? We have to look at helping victims and survivors, but we also have to look at the other side of that and getting to those individuals that need the help in reprogramming their behaviors so that they learn healthy ways to cope. So Nicole, let's talk just slightly about service numbers and what those look like in a given year. For those coming to Solution Center, and Amy, you can chime in too if you have some statistics related to that, because I think a lot of times this is really surprising for people. It's one of those not in my backyard type of situations, and so when you hear the statistics, a lot of times it really is like, whoa, okay, there are a lot of people that are dealing with this. So go ahead, Nicole.
Yeah, sure. So, in regards to shelter, we usually shelter specifically domestic violence victims, about 150 a year. And that's a combination of women and kids. I would say usually closer to 100 women, and then more around the 50 mark for children that are coming into our shelter and staying with us for safety. We provide outreach services to about 100 other survivors who aren't needing shelter. And I would say about 40 to 50 of those are really concentrated on legal advocacy services. So we are not lawyers. We do not provide any sort of legal advice or services, but we can be there for emotional support, court accompaniment, things like that. And then also we take about 1,100 crisis phone calls every year as well. And when I just looked it up, we have provided about 6,000 hours of advocacy services annually for the last several years. And so when you kind of break that down, I mean, we're talking about 66% of every 24-hour period every day is directly talking with a survivor and helping them through something going on in their life. So it's really incredible. And then I also just kind of want to note that when we are looking at survivors and the data that we have, about 42% of the victims that we're working with have not only experienced domestic violence, but an additional crime committed against them at some point in their life. Like Amy said, maybe that goes back to childhood and we're talking about child abuse or child sexual assault or something, but it also goes to like robbery or some sort of identity theft or some sort of being a victim of a DUI incident. I mean, when we're thinking of crimes, it could really be multitudes of them, but that's a really big number. Almost half of our population have actually experienced more than one crime against them.
Amy, did you have numbers you wanted to share from?
I did not, unfortunately. I can just say that we do have a small staff here. We have about 6 individuals here, and we constantly have someone is either in session or working on some kind of community resource. We do have 2 individuals that are full-time, and then 2 that are like kind of 3/4 time, and then a part-time individual as well. So but it's huge being able to have the collaboration with Solution Center, because of course, when it comes to legal advocacy, we just have one individual who does the legal advocacy work. And there has been a number of times where she just didn't have the ability in her schedule to be able to provide a service, especially when we're looking at restraining orders, and having that partnership with Solution Center. It's a quick phone call. Hey, I have this individual looking for a restraining order. Do you have availability? And vice versa as well. Or even help out with court hearings. If one individual isn't able to come, then the other agency and service is able to help out, which is awesome to have the 2 different services in our community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the collaboration between the 2 programs is unique, I think. A lot of times you don't see that level of collaboration of 2 somewhat similar programs, but not totally the same. So speaking of collaboration, I know that you do a lot of work surrounding prevention. And I think when it really gets down to the 2 primary ways that the general public can work to change the course for victims of domestic violence, it comes down to awareness building, a little bit of what we're doing here today, right? And what you do every single day and what you're doing, as well as prevention work. So Amy, can you talk a little bit about what happens with the youth in our schools, as well as the Green Dot Bystander Intervention Program, of which both you and Nicole are trained facilitators. Amy, you're a rock star. You've been doing, boy, has there been one in recent months that you have been a part of, which we so appreciate here at the Women's Fund. So can you talk to that just briefly about the prevention aspect of things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really kind of that awareness piece like you're talking about, Maria. I do really enjoy the Green Dot Initiative. It's our bystander intervention training, more geared for the community, because we all have our own kind of comfort level, so to speak. And so it's a unique way that we can still get involved, still do something despite those barriers that we may personally have. And then within the schools, it's really kind of working on that foundation, just being able to identify what are different feelings that we have, because it's okay to have those different emotions, but what do we do with it when we're struggling, or who can I talk to? So we really look at those coping strategies, healthy relationships, and not only like in person, but online as well. As we know, we're very, very heavy into social media. So that just being able to have those conversations, what are safe things to look for? So when we do our prevention, we are working with another program called A-Step. Their program is different focus, but we're both, looking at prevention. So being able to have really the three different programs, the three different agencies going in and doing prevention, it's great having that collaboration because there's so much that we cover. The friendships, coping, like I mentioned, being able to identify those yuck feelings that things seem off. So it's really that awareness and just knowing that, domestic violence does happen in our community. You think of the national statistic, right? And 1 in 4 women in their lifetime, 1 in 7 men, chances are we know someone who has been or will be in a violent relationship. So just being kind of in the know that there is no stereotypical victim or stereotypical offender, that it could be our neighbor or colleague. It's just kind of being aware and being able, how can we be that support and backup, depending on what our role is as a bystander or someone maybe that's directly affected, knowing there's resources out there.
Mhm. Yeah, I know for those of us at the Women's Fund, our board of directors, and myself as a staff person here, I'm especially proud of the work that we're doing to help raise awareness, because I know that the programs that you're doing, you are very crisis oriented, and you have to be that, right? You are doing prevention work, but so much of your time and resources has to go to the woman and child standing at your front door, right? And so for us to be able to help raise the awareness through dollars and through time invested, that's really the way we get to that. When we start changing that whole generational cycles of abuse and learning for children to learn that, okay, this is what your home situation looked like, but that is not what you need to repeat when you grow up, I think is hugely important to getting to where we need to be in the future. So speaking of that, awareness building and some prevention work, Nicole, we have the big event coming up, Light Up the Night, here in early October. What is planned for that? How can people get involved? Give us the scoop on everything that's happening with Light Up the Night.
Awesome. Yes, I'd love to. And Amy, feel free to jump in if I forget anything. But we kind of have two focuses. So we try to focus specifically on our annual event, which is called Light Up the Night, in addition to the entire month of October for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So specifically for our annual Light Up the Night event this year, which is going to be on October 7th, it's a Thursday, we are going to be hosting a remembrance vigil gathering over at the Clock Tower downtown Fond du Lac, and it's going to be up all day. So we'll be setting up in the morning. We'll actually have some representatives there throughout the day to really just kind of talk to people, provide information, and just kind of answer questions and be there to show support to survivors and victims of domestic violence. And then later that evening, we will be reading a remembrance poem that we've been using for the last couple of years, remembering victims in our community or victims that people in our community know and have been affected by violence in their life. And then also doing a moment of silence and remembrance for those individuals that we have lost. And every year we do focus on the Wisconsin Homicide Report, which comes out through End Domestic Abuse Wisconsin, and they've been doing this for many, many years now. And so specifically, we can talk to numbers and the individuals who have lost their lives in 2020. So that report hasn't come out yet, but we will have it before the event, and we can talk about that. So our evening vigil, will be doing it twice. We'll be doing it once at 6 p.m. and then we'll be doing it again at 6:45. And we can gather there at the Clock Tower in downtown Fond du Lac. And then throughout the entire month, we are kind of doing something or trying to get more people involved. And so we have these purple light bulbs right here, and they are available at Solution Center. They're available at Domestic Violence Services. Women's Fund will have some, and we're asking for a suggested donation between $1 and $5. And if you have one of your own, perfect, use what you have and to install them on your porch. So we're really hoping to have these lights lit up the entire month of October to show our support for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And hopefully we'll have yard signs that you can have put out in your yard as well to, again, just further spread that awareness. What we would love for you to do is if you do have a purple light on your porch is to take a picture, put it on social media, and then tag our Prevention Education Committee, which is at FDLPEC. And with our hashtags, we're using Light Up the Night FDL, and we will also share those posts and spread it everywhere, social media, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and really just help us spread that message that Fond du Lac says no more to domestic violence. And we're here to share that with survivors and victims who are affected.
Yeah, let's light up the night purple for the entire month. So purple is the domestic violence awareness color. I'm sure I believe there's a Wear Purple Day. I don't recall which day that is, but look to our social media. We'll be promoting that as well. Just real quick, ladies, could you share out the crisis line phone numbers in case this has prompted someone who's watching to want to reach out for help. So Nicole, what is the crisis line number someone can call at Solution Center?
Yes, so you can call 920-923-1743. But if you are also looking to directly reach our shelter, that number is 920-923-2880.
Okay, and Amy at Agnesian, SSM?
Yes. We are at 920-926-4207.
Excellent. Well, ladies, I can't say enough for the work that you do. This is not an easy gig for you to put yourselves within the stories and the lives of people who have endured the type of physical, emotional, mental abuse. So I want to say thank you for just being so selfless in committing yourself to this cause and working with people that absolutely need your help. So thank you to your staffs, and we hope that the community comes out to support everyone at Light Up the Night. So with that, we're ending another edition of Project Table Talk. Thank you both for being here, and we will see everyone again at 1 o'clock on Thursday, October 14th, to discuss another great topic related to our mission of facilitating bold change for women and girls throughout Fond du Lac County. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.